Yo, what's up? Never just received changes for version 3. I wanted to go over them and how they affect her kit and her damage. Okay, so the first change here is the Veil of Falsehood, her passive. So, after absorbing Seas of Deceit via the Ascension talent, A Wager of Moonlight, Nefer gains this effect, thereby increasing the damage dealt by her Phantasm performance. Each stack of Veil of Falsehood increases the damage dealt by Nefer's Phantasm performance by now 8%. Previously it was 10%. And then the initial max number of stacks is still 3, with each stack lasting for 9 seconds. Each stack's duration is counted independently. So what this basically means is the 1.3 times multiplier at the end of her kit is now only a 1.24 multiplier. So this is an actual nerf to her kit, but as I'm about to go over in the other change, there was a somewhat semi-buff. But before we get into that, are you tired of painstakingly farming for Primo Gems? Want to make sure you have enough to guarantee that next 5-star character or weapon? Level up your savings with LootBar. Whether you're topping up your Genesis crystals for the new Luna 1 reset, or grabbing a Blessing of the Welkin Moon, LootBar has you covered with incredible discounts on not just Genshin Impact, but a variety of other games. Don't miss out on these deals. Use my link in the description to get started and give your gaming wallet a major break today. Okay, so the next change that Nefer had was her A4. Before, her A4 used to be, each point of Nefer's elemental masher beyond 500 will increase her attack by 0.4, a maximum of 200 attack can be gained in this manner. This was basically a very useless passive considering most of her damage comes from elemental mastery anyway. This wasn't really serving a purpose, but now, while Nefer is in the Shadow Dance state, if a party member triggers the Lunar Bloom reaction within 5 seconds, Nefer will continue to regenerate Verdant Dew while entering Snake Slither. This regeneration is increased by 10% for every 100 points of elemental mastery above 500 up to a maximum of 50%. So this basically increases her Verdant Dew generation when she's on field by 50%. Okay, here I have some gameplay where I'm essentially using Tignari as the replacement for Nefer, and I'm using Nahida, Aino, and Lauma. I'm going to show you how I would go through this team's rotation and how the Verdant Dew generation is affected. Okay, first off, we're starting with Aino's skill just to apply Hydro, then swapping to Nahida using EQ to start generating Verdant Dew. So then here you can see I have 1 stack of Verdant Dew, but I no longer have a Hydro Aura, meaning I am no longer going to be creating these Verdant Dew. So now I'm going to swap back to Aino and use her Elemental Burst. Then swapping to Lauma, I'll use the Q in order for the Verdant Dew to generate while I'm using it. Then I'll tap E, finally going to Nefer, or Tignari in this case. And then I use Elemental Burst because it's fairly similar to the time it takes for Nefer to cast her skill into her first charge attack. So imagine that I lose a stack of Verdant Dew as soon as I do use Elemental Burst. So you can see here that as soon as I do use it and I'm entering my Elemental skill state, I'll start generating it more quickly so that I'll be able to consistently spam my charge attack. Like I was saying in my previous videos how there might have been a problem with Verdant Dew generation, this video, in my opinion, and this way that I set this up, kind of attributes that to there might have been Verdant Dew problems in the old teams. That's why they made this change. Okay, so does this necessarily buff or nerf the teams? Let's take a look at my sheets. Okay, so from a completely numerical standpoint, and assuming the same assumptions that we had for previous beta cycles, in this beta cycle, yes, it is technically a nerf. So right here, I have the pre-version 3 updated calcs for when I had the 19-second rotations, something we learned this week because of more gameplay footage we got. So you can see here for C0 Aino, I have 102k DPS, C1 I have 108k, and then C6 I have 114k. Then post V3 with the 1.24 multiplier nerf, you can see C0 dropped to around 99k, C1 dropped to 104k, and then C6 dropped to 110k. All of these are around a 4%-ish team DPS nerf from their previous successor, but something I do need to point out is that I believe that the previous calcs were flawed when it came to Verdant Dew generation. So I believe that there is a chance that this number is kind of inflated because of how we were assuming the amount of charge attacks and the amount of Verdant Dew generation you were going to get would work. So there is a chance that this number here is genuinely inflated and you wouldn't actually get as many charge attacks here as you think you would because of how Verdant Dew works. But post A4 buff from V3, now that the Verdant Dew generation is even stronger from the A4, there is a chance that this one is actually more accurate, and it could be a buff because this one might not have been accurate. So in conclusion, what I'm really saying is that from the assumptions that majority of people and myself were making from the pre-version 3 beta, so version 1 and 2, this is numerically a nerf, but the realistic setting and reality of how it could be applied is that there is a possibility even that this is technically a buff. It's just no one has really sheeted it because of our assumptions that we had earlier on in the beta. So what do all these changes mean? Well, from all these changes that you can kind of gather that Aino isn't really the greatest Hydro applier here. So getting a faster Hydro Applier that does the same amount of buffing or utility that Ino has, someone like Columbina in the future would slot in perfectly here, because that would allow you to then generate more Verdant Dew earlier on in the rotation, possibly giving Llama the ability to use her Hold Elemental skill, and then also giving Nefer the possibility to actually get all of her charge attacks on time from the Verdant Dews, but you can't like increase the rotation times or anything. So the main conclusion that I would draw here is that they are trying to change Nefer to then shill a future Hydra unit. So you can see now she's more in line with what Flynn's premium team would be with C6 Ino. So I think this is a very healthy location for her to be placed right now, considering both Flynn's and her will probably get a substantial buff with the release of Columbina. So it goes Mawika, Skirk, Verissa, Flynn's, and Nefer. So I think this is a relatively healthy place, and I don't think there's going to be anything else that's going to get really changed in this beta, other than like maybe slight modifications to numbers or the elemental burst. But I do believe this is a good spot, and it leaves the potential for growth in the future without it feeling like egregious, overwhelming power creep. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you check out my loot bars in the description, and then go ahead and check out my TikTok and Twitter. Thank you so much.